Once upon a time, in a small, quiet town surrounded by fields of sunflowers, there lived a woman named Margaret Hale. She was gentle, kind, and known by everyone for her warm smile and the way she always remembered every little thing. Birthdays, recipes, old stories, even the names of children she'd met only once. But time, as it often does, began to change things. Margaret was now 72, and her once busy home had grown still. Her husband had passed away years ago, and her only son, Daniel, visited her every morning before work. He brought groceries, made her tea, and always left her smiling. "Morning, Mom," he would say, setting a fresh loaf of bread on the table. She would grin and pat his cheek. "Thank you, dear. You're such a good boy, Michael." Daniel's smile would falter for just a second before he answered softly, "It's Daniel, Mom." "Oh, right. Daniel," she'd say, nodding as if the name had just slipped away for a moment. But the next day, and the day after that, she called him Michael again. Michael was Daniel's older brother, the one who had died when they were children. At first, Daniel thought it was just a mistake, a memory from long ago slipping out. But soon, it became a pattern. She began forgetting where she put her teacup, what day it was, or that Daniel had already come to visit that morning. Some days she would sit by the window and whisper to herself, "Michael will be home soon." And Daniel, standing in the doorway, would whisper back, "I'm here, Mom. I've been here all along." The days at Margaret Hale's house began to feel slower, softer, but also sadder. The sunlight still poured through the kitchen window each morning, but the woman who once hummed old songs while baking bread now sat quietly, staring at nothing in particular. Her son Daniel came every day, just as he always had. He made her breakfast, helped her dress, and listened patiently as she told the same stories over and over. "Do you remember when your brother Michael broke his arm climbing that old oak tree?" she'd say, laughing gently. Daniel would nod, even though the memory stung. "I remember, Mom." She'd smile. "He was such a brave boy." Then she'd pause, tilt her head, and ask, "Do you know him?" Daniel swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Yeah, Mom. I knew him well." Each evening, he'd tuck her into bed, just like she once did for him. And every night, before closing her eyes, she'd murmur, "Good night, Michael." Daniel always answered softly, "Good night, Mom," before turning off the light. But when he stepped into the hallway, his eyes filled with tears. The boy she remembered wasn't the man standing before her. He was gone, and in her fading mind, he had taken Daniel's place.
One afternoon, the family doctor, Dr. Harris, sat with Daniel at the kitchen table. "She's slipping further into her memory loss," the doctor said gently. "It's part of the illness. Her mind is clinging to what feels safe, and that's Michael." Daniel rubbed his face, exhausted. "So, she'll never remember me again?" Dr. Harris sighed. "There might be moments, small ones, where she does, but they won't last long. You'll have to love her through both the remembering and the forgetting." That night, Daniel watched his mother sleep, her hand clutching a faded photograph of two young boys, Michael and himself. He whispered into the stillness, "I'll keep coming, Mom. Even if you forget me every day, I'll keep reminding you who I am, and how much I love you." And though she couldn't hear him, somewhere deep inside, a piece of her still knew. It was a Sunday morning when Daniel Hale decided to clean his mother's attic. Dust floated in the sunlight as he opened old boxes, each one filled with pieces of a life slowly slipping away. There were Christmas cards, yellowed letters, and photo albums so worn that the corners curled. He carried one of them downstairs and placed it on the kitchen table. "Mom," he said gently, "look what I found." Margaret turned her head slowly, her eyes clouded but still warm. "What's that, dear?" "Your old photo album," Daniel said, opening it carefully. "Do you remember this?" The first page showed a young woman, Margaret herself, holding two small boys in her lap, both laughing wildly. One had a freckled nose and curly hair, Michael. The other, with a missing front tooth, was Daniel. For a long time, Margaret stared at the picture. Then her lips trembled. "That's Michael," she said softly, touching the photo. "My sweet boy." Daniel smiled. "Yes, Mom, that's Michael." Her finger traced the other child's face. And who's that?" Daniel hesitated. "That's me, Mom. That's Daniel." She blinked, her eyes flickering with confusion. "Oh, Daniel, you were friends with Michael, weren't you?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Yeah, we were very close." They turned more pages, birthdays, holidays, family trips. And for a little while it felt almost normal. She laughed softly at the silly clothes they wore, the messy cakes, the crooked Christmas tree. Then suddenly she looked up at him and said, "You remind me of my Michael. You even sound like him." Daniel smiled through the ache in his chest. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever told me, Mom." When she grew tired, he helped her to bed. As he turned off the lamp, she murmured, half asleep, "Tell Michael I love him, will you?" Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand. "I will, Mom. I promise."
And when the room went dark, he opened the photo album again, not to remember for himself, but to remember for her. The first real snow of winter fell that morning, soft, white, and silent. Margaret Hale sat by the living room window, watching flakes drift down like feathers. For a moment she smiled. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Michael always loved the snow." In the kitchen, Daniel stirred a pot of soup, listening. Every memory his mother shared about Michael felt like a little echo of his own childhood, but each echo was getting fainter. "Lunch is ready, Mom," he called. There was no reply. He wiped his hands and walked into the living room. The chair was empty. The front door was open. "Mom?" His voice cracked. Outside, the snow crunched beneath his boots. He saw her footprints leading down the street. Small, slow steps through the white. Panic hit his chest like cold wind. He found her a few blocks away, standing in front of a little blue house. Her old house. The one they'd sold years ago after his father died. "Mom!" he called, running toward her. She turned, startled. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel stopped in his tracks. "It's me, Mom." "Daniel." She looked at him blankly, then turned back to the house. "I'm waiting for my husband. He works at the factory. He'll be home soon, and the boys will want dinner." Daniel's heart ached so deeply it felt hard to breathe. "Mom, Dad's gone. We moved years ago. You're safe, okay?" Her eyes filled with confusion. No, that's not right. This is my home." He took her hand gently, his eyes wet with tears. "It was your home, Mom, but now you live with me. Let's go home together, okay?" She looked at him for a long time, searching his face. Finally, she whispered, "Michael?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, Mom," he said softly, voice breaking. "It's Michael. Let's go home." He walked her back through the snow, holding her hand the whole way. Inside, he helped her warm up, wrapped her in a blanket, and sat beside her until she drifted to sleep. As the snow fell outside the window, Daniel whispered to himself, "If being Michael is what keeps her calm, then I'll be Michael, for as long as she needs me to be." And from that day on, he stopped correcting her. For a few peaceful days after the snowstorm, things felt calm again in Margaret Hale's house. She laughed at the television shows Daniel put on, hummed softly to the old records they used to play together, and sometimes even remembered what day it was. Then, one morning, when Daniel arrived with groceries, he noticed something odd on her bedroom door. Written in shaky blue ink, taped to the wood, was a small piece of paper. It read, "Michael's room. Do not enter." Daniel froze, staring at it. His heart thudded slowly in his chest. He opened the door quietly, afraid of what he might find. Inside, his mother was sitting on the bed, folding laundry that wasn't there, her hands moving through empty air. "Mom," he said softly. She looked up, smiling. "Oh, Michael, you're home early." He walked closer, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mom, it's me, Daniel." Her smile faltered. No, that's my oldest boy. You're one of his friends, aren't you?" Daniel took a deep breath, forcing back tears. "Something like that." She nodded, content. "Good. I'm glad he still has such nice friends." He sat beside her and helped her fold the invisible clothes. "You miss him, don't you?" Her voice softened to a whisper. "Every day. He was my light. When I lost him, I felt like I lost the mornings too." Daniel's throat tightened. "You didn't lose everything, Mom," he said quietly. "You still have me." She turned her face toward him, her eyes searching his. For just a second, her confusion faded, and something like recognition flickered there.
"Daniel," she whispered. He smiled, his heart leaping. "Yeah, Mom, it's me." Her lips trembled. "Oh, Daniel." She reached out, touching his cheek. "You grew up." Tears blurred his vision. I did, Mom, I did." But before he could say more, the moment slipped away. Her eyes clouded again, and she smiled faintly. "Tell Michael I love him, will you?" Daniel nodded, wiping his tears. "I will, Mom. I always do." And as he left the room, he gently removed the paper from the door. But he didn't throw it away. He folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket, because even if she forgot him, he would never forget her. There was an old upright piano in the corner of Margaret Hale's living room. A little out of tune, its keys yellowed with age. For years it had sat silent, but one afternoon, Daniel lifted its lid and pressed a few notes. The sound was thin, fragile, but warm, like a voice that hadn't spoken in a long time. Margaret, sitting nearby, with a blanket over her knees, looked up suddenly. "I know that song," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "You do? I wasn't sure you'd remember." Her eyes brightened. "Your father taught it to me. Claire de Lune. We used to play it after dinner. Michael would dance around the living room and you—" She stopped, her brow furrowing. "You'd sit by the window, watching." Daniel froze, the notes trembling beneath his fingertips. "That's right, Mom. I used to watch." He began to play, slowly, hesitant at first, then smoother as the melody filled the room. Margaret closed her eyes, her lips parting in a soft hum. For a few minutes, she wasn't confused, wasn't lost, she was simply there, smiling, swaying gently to the music. When the final note faded, she looked at him with clear, tearful eyes.
That was beautiful, Daniel. He blinked, barely believing what he'd heard. You said my name. She smiled faintly. Of course I did, sweetheart. How could I forget my own son? His heart swelled so much it almost hurt. He stood and hugged her, whispering, You didn't forget, you just misplaced it for a little while. She chuckled softly, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. Maybe I did. For the rest of the afternoon, Daniel played and Margaret hummed, two souls finding their way back to each other through music and memory. But as dusk fell and the shadows grew long, she began to fade again. Michael, she said gently as he covered her with her blanket, promise you'll keep playing for me. Daniel smiled sadly. I promise, Mom.
That night, after she fell asleep, he sat alone at the piano and played Claire de Lune once more, this time for both of them, and for all the things love remembers even when memory doesn't. It was a gray afternoon, quiet and calm, the kind of day when the world feels half asleep. Daniel Hale was folding laundry in the kitchen when he realized the house had gone too silent. "Mom?" he called softly. No answer. He checked the living room, empty. Her blanket lay neatly folded on the chair. The door to the porch stood open, the cold air drifting in. His heart skipped. "Mom!" he shouted, panic rising. Outside, the sky was heavy with clouds. He ran down the driveway, calling her name again and again. A neighbor pointed toward the park across the street. "She went that way a little while ago," they said. Daniel sprinted, his breath sharp in his chest. He found her there, Margaret, standing barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the old playground. She didn't seem frightened, just lost. "Mom," he gasped, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "You scared me. What are you doing out here?" She looked up at him, eyes clouded with confusion. "I was looking for Michael. He said he'd meet me by the swings." Daniel's heart cracked. "Mom," he whispered, "Michael can't come." She frowned. "He promised." He took her hands gently. "He can't come, Mom, but I did. I'll always come." For a moment she studied his face, and something flickered behind her eyes, a memory struggling to surface. "Daniel?" she whispered, uncertain. "Yes, Mom, it's me, Daniel." Her lips trembled. "You look so much like him." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I think he sent me, so you'd never have to wait alone." A light drizzle began to fall, the raindrops glistening on her gray hair. Daniel guided her back toward the house, his arm around her shoulders. When they reached the porch, she turned to look at him again. "You're a good boy, Michael," she murmured, her memory slipping once more. Daniel smiled through his tears. "Thanks, Mom," he said gently. "Let's get you warm." That night, after tucking her into bed, he sat at the piano and played softly, not to bring her memory back, but to remind himself why he kept coming home. Because love, even when forgotten, still remembers who it belongs to. A week after the day Margaret wandered away, Daniel decided to do something to help her remember, even if only for a moment. He spent the evening in the attic, digging through boxes of old things, photographs, letters, perfume bottles, and tiny trinkets that once filled their home with laughter. Each item carried a piece of her, the woman she used to be.
When he came downstairs, he placed a small wooden box on the coffee table. The lid was carved with a single word: memories. The next morning, when Margaret woke up, Daniel sat beside her with the box. "Good morning, Mom," he said gently. "I made something for us." She looked at it curiously. "What is it, dear?" "It's your memory box," he explained, opening the lid. "Each thing in here tells a story about your life." Inside, she found her old wedding ring, a seashell from their family trip to Maine,
a small photo of her husband, and a drawing two little boys had made long ago. Stick figures labeled Mom, Michael, and Daniel. Her fingers trembled as she touched the paper. "Did Michael draw this?" Daniel nodded. "You helped him." She smiled faintly. He was always so creative. Then her hand paused on the photo of her husband. Her voice softened. "He's gone now, isn't he?" "Yes, Mom," Daniel said quietly. She looked up, eyes full of tears. "And Michael?" He hesitated. "Yes, Mom. Him too." Margaret closed her eyes, breathing shakily. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she opened them and whispered, "Then that means you're Daniel." Daniel's throat tightened. "Yes," he said softly. "I'm Daniel." She reached out, touching his cheek. "Oh, my sweet boy, you never stopped coming, did you?" "No, Mom," he whispered, holding her hand. "I never will." For the rest of that day, they sat together going through the box. Some memories made her laugh, others made her cry, but every now and then, for a fleeting moment, she truly knew who he was. And when she forgot again that night, the box was there on the table, waiting to help her find her way back. The morning came like any other, quiet and pale, with soft sunlight slipping through the curtains. Daniel Hale made tea for his mother, humming the same tune she used to hum when he was a boy. But when he brought her cup into the living room, something felt different. Margaret was sitting upright on the couch, her eyes clear, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Good morning, Mom," he said gently, setting the cup down. She looked up, her gaze steady, and for the first time in months, it wasn't clouded or lost. "Daniel," she said softly. He froze. "What did you say?" "Daniel," she repeated, smiling. "My son, my Daniel." The cup of tea trembled in his hands. You remember?" Tears filled her eyes. "I do, at least for now." She reached out, holding his hand tightly. "Oh, sweetheart, I've been trapped in fog for so long, but I can see you now. You've grown so much. You stayed." He knelt beside her, tears spilling freely. "I never left, Mom. Even when you didn't know me, I was here." She stroked his face with trembling fingers. "I know, my love. I felt you. Even when my mind forgot, my heart remembered." They sat there for hours, talking about everything: the past, his childhood, the day she taught him to ride a bike, his father's laugh, and even Michael. She spoke of him without confusion this time, her words clear but tender. "Michael's gone," she said quietly. "But you, Daniel, you stayed. You carried all of us." He nodded, smiling through his tears. "I carried you, Mom, because you carried me first." When evening came, she grew tired. Daniel helped her into bed, tucking her in like she used to do for him. As he turned to leave, she whispered, "Daniel?" "Yes, Mom." "If tomorrow I forget again," she paused, her voice trembling, "don't be sad. Just play the piano. That song always brings me back, even if only for a moment." He smiled softly. "I promise." That night, as she drifted into sleep, Daniel sat at the piano and played Clair de Lune. The notes floated through the house, gentle, patient, full of love. And in her dreams, Margaret was young again, dancing in the living room with her two boys, her husband smiling from the doorway, everything whole once more. Winter came quietly that year, soft, white, and full of stillness.
The frost clung to the windows of Margaret Hale's small home, and the air inside smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon. But beneath the calm, Daniel felt a growing heaviness. His mother had begun to sleep longer, speak less. Some days she would wake up and know him right away. "Daniel, my boy," she'd whisper with a smile. But more often now, her eyes drifted past him like she was looking through time itself. He spent every day by her side. He read her stories from her favorite books, played the piano softly, and kept the memory box close on the nightstand. Sometimes she would open it and smile faintly, tracing her finger along the photo of her two sons. "Michael looks so happy," she'd murmur. Daniel would nod, his voice low. "He is, Mom. He's peaceful now." Then she would look at him, her gaze warm but weary. "And you, Daniel, you've been so patient with me. I learned from you. You never gave up on anyone." One night, snow began to fall thick and heavy. The world outside was silent, glowing white under the moon. Daniel sat beside her bed, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. "Mom," he whispered, "do you remember the song?" Her lips curved faintly. "Claire de Lune," she breathed. He moved to the piano and played, soft, slow, steady. The melody filled the room, wrapping around them like a blanket. As the final notes faded, she stirred slightly and whispered, "That's beautiful, Michael." Daniel turned, tears sliding down his cheeks. "It's Daniel, Mom," he said softly. Her eyes opened, clear, bright, and full of love. "I know," she whispered, "my Daniel." She reached for his hand, her fingers light as snow. "When I forget again," she said, voice trembling, "promise me you'll remember for both of us." He held her hand to his heart. "Always." That night, as the snow covered the earth outside, Margaret Hale slipped peacefully into sleep, her last sleep, with a smile on her face and her son's music still echoing through the room. And when Daniel kissed her forehead goodbye, he whispered the words she had once said to him as a boy. "Good night, Mom. I'll see you in the morning light." The house felt different now, too quiet, too still. After the funeral, Daniel Hale walked through the rooms his mother once filled with laughter and soft humming. Her blanket still rested on the arm of the chair. Her teacup sat beside it, untouched. But the hardest thing to look at was the piano. It sat by the window, sunlight glinting off the polished keys. The lid was open, a faint layer of dust settling over it, as though even time hesitated to disturb what remained. For days Daniel couldn't bring himself to touch it. Every time he passed, he could almost hear her voice. "Play for me, Michael. Play for me, Daniel." One evening, as snow began to fall again, he finally sat down on the bench. The room smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. He placed his hands on the keys and hesitated, then began to play Claire de Lune. The first note echoed through the room, soft and trembling. His chest tightened, but as he played on, the house didn't feel empty anymore. Each note felt like a heartbeat, hers and his, still connected, still alive. When he finished, he stayed there in silence for a long while. Then he opened her memory box one last time. Inside he found a small folded piece of paper he hadn't seen before. His name was written on it, in her shaky handwriting. "My Daniel, if one day I don't know your face, please remember this. My heart never forgot you. Love stays even when memory fades. Keep the music playing. It will always bring me home." Daniel pressed the note to his chest and wept, not just from grief, but from gratitude. He looked around the quiet room and whispered, "You're home, Mom. You always were."
That night, as the snow fell softly outside, the piano played once more, not from his hands this time, but from the echo of love that never truly left. The house stayed quiet through the rest of that winter, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. Daniel Hale kept the curtains open, letting light pour across the floor where his mother used to sit. Her photographs still hung on the walls, and her laughter still seemed to linger in the corners of every room. He didn't move away. He couldn't. The little home was more than bricks and memories now. It was part of who they both were. Every evening, after work, he sat at the piano. Sometimes he played Clair de Lune, sometimes the small lullabies his mother used to hum when he was a boy. And on certain nights, when the wind slipped through the window just right, he could almost hear her voice humming along. People from the neighborhood often stopped by. Some brought flowers, others brought stories. They'd tell Daniel how his mother always remembered them, their birthdays, their favorite recipes, their children's names, even when she'd started forgetting her own. One little girl from next door, Lucy, loved to listen to him play. "Who taught you that song?" she asked one day. "My mom," Daniel said, smiling softly. "She used to forget a lot of things near the end, but she never forgot the music." Lucy tilted her head. "So if I learn it, will I remember her too?" Daniel nodded, moved by her innocence. "Yes, every time you play it, she'll be here a little bit." And so he taught her, note by note, the same way his mother had once taught him. Soon other children joined in, filling the house with laughter and melodies. One spring afternoon, Daniel placed his mother's memory box on top of the piano. He opened it one last time and whispered, "See, Mom, the music's still going." Outside, the snow had melted. The world was green again, and a soft breeze fluttered the curtains. The tune drifted through the window and into the open air, gentle, timeless, full of love. Because love, he realized, never fades with memory. It lingers in the spaces between notes, in the warmth of sunlight, and in every song that's ever played again. And as the last chord echoed softly through the house, it was as if the world itself whispered back, "She remembers you, Daniel, always."